So you're making a movie, and as a writer or a director, producer, what is the first thing you're going to show people? What does that opening sequence need to accomplish? Well, it needs to set expectations. It needs to pique people's interest, a little bit of mystery. Probably going to need to do a little exposition, explain a little bit of what's going on in this world. And it has to grab people's attention, make them want to watch your movie. For a low budget movie, no stars, unknown director, no intellectual property to piggyback on, getting attention is probably the most important thing your opening sequence needs to do. This may clash with some artistic desires. Um, you know, do we have any time for some subtle, character-driven, slow burn introduction? Do we even have time for an establishing shot? The desire or need to grab attention can definitely clash with a classic screenplay structure. Simply put, that first half of the first act is mainly about just establishing the status quo, the world as it is, before the call to action, before the call to the hero's journey. The excitement has not happened yet. We're just finding the character in their regular life. That may be a little boring. We don't have 10, 15 minutes to wait before we first have something exciting happening. But I'll talk about screenplay structure in a different video. The main thing I want to focus on in this video is simply the opening sequence. Even movie trailers today have trailers before them to grab people's attention. And if we don't think people will pay attention for 2 or 3 minutes to our movie trailer, then what do we think we need to do in that first minute of the movie itself to grab their attention enough to keep them watching? I'm Nathan Willard, writer and director of Once Upon a Time in the Apocalypse, and I'm going to look at this movie I made at its opening sequence, talk about what I think I did right and maybe what I did wrong, and right or wrong, what I maybe should have done differently. Now, from an artistic story point of view, that first half of the first act needs to establish the world in which we find our main characters. What's going on in this world? What is the setting? What is the time period? What are the problems that are going on? And more specifically, who are the characters in this story? What are their challenges and what are their problems, and maybe what are their flaws that they might need to overcome in the story? From an actual getting people to watch your movie point of view, it needs to grab their attention and engage them and keep them watching. Whatever it takes to do that, you're accomplishing your goal. Now, if your movie is going to get a huge promotional campaign, lots and lots of money spent to tell the world about your movie, and people are very likely going to go see your movie in a theater, that opening sequence is not nearly as important when it comes to grabbing people's attention. If they've paid a bunch of money to go watch your movie in a theater, they're probably not going to walk out in the first 5 minutes. And it's probably going to have a few stars they know and like, and a director they may know and think, oh, well, I like this person's movie, so I really want to see this movie. They already have knowledge of what to expect, so that first sequence doesn't have to do so much work when it comes to just grabbing people's attention. But if it's going straight to streaming and it doesn't have any big name stars, no name director, and nobody's heard of you before, then really all they're going on is the thumbnail they see on the streaming site. That's got their interest. They might read the description. They might watch the trailer, but nothing else. They probably just saw the thumbnail and the title, and they thought, well, that sounds interesting, and maybe they're interested in the genre that the movie is identified as. So they give it a try, and you need to grab their attention quickly. Now, it doesn't need to grab everyone's attention. This is a really important point. It needs to simply grab the attention of the intended audience. And hopefully that audience is big enough to make your movie successful, which is something you need to consider before you even begin writing the movie. Is there a big enough audience of people out there in this world that want to watch this movie. But the point is, not everybody has to like your movie. If you are making a low-budget movie, and especially if you're making a micro-budget movie, you're going to be making that movie for a niche market. You should know that there's already a group of people who like this kind of movie, and they don't care if it has stars in it. They don't care if it has a big budget. They like these kinds of stories, and they're looking for these kinds of stories. These are the people your opening sequence needs to get the attention of. So how do you get their attention? Well,
The Rifleman. Starring Chuck Connors.
you need to make it very clear very quickly what the movie is. Set some expectations and make some promises. So, like I said, you should probably be making a genre movie for an established niche market of people who like that specific genre. So make it obvious what that genre is. If you're making a horror movie, open with some horror. If you're making an action movie, open with some action. You're going to be giving them a preview of what the whole movie is about to make them want to see more, get their attention, and engage them. And this even works for the most artsy, art house, indie film that you're just trying to get it into a film festival. Well, that opening sequence, it better let whoever's watching it know this is an artsy, art house, indie film made for film festivals. Show them what they want to see. So, did I do this in Once Upon a Time in the Apocalypse? Maybe. Could I have done better? Probably. So let's look at the film, and I'll go through what I was doing, why I did what I did, and what I might have been able to improve. So first, this was intended to be the opening shot. And this scene that follows, now just the part where we're actually in this room, not intercutting with the house, just me fighting with this guy. House sequence is going to come later. This opening sequence is supposed to be reminiscent of the original Mad Max. And I was actually thinking of making a direct reference to Mad Max, starting it out with that same text a few years from now. But no other explanation. Just like in Mad Max, we just find ourselves in this world, and you know, we think of Mad Max as this post-apocalyptic movie, but if you actually watch the thing, it's nothing like most post-apocalyptic movies. There's still people eating in a restaurant. There's still a city where people are going camping for the weekend in a camper, for crying out loud. I mean, it's a weird world. It's like, it's a sort of dystopian thing, but we haven't reached Road Warrior level yet here in the original Mad Max. And how did we end up in this world? There is no explanation. I like that. And I actually think it's a weakness of the later Mad Max films and most post-apocalyptic films where they feel a need to explain in depth all about the apocalypse, what happened, and quite often you'll see a news anchor and you're getting news reports.
Apocalyptic movie opens with grainy news footage of a montage of apocalyptic cliche.
It doesn't matter. And that's not the point of the movie. Now, Contagion, okay, it's important to know that it's caused by this monkey and causing a outbreak of some particular virus in the world, because that's important to the point, like, because that is what the movie is about. But most post-apocalyptic movies are not really about the event that caused the apocalypse. They are about people living and surviving in a chaotic, lawless world. Most post-apocalyptic movies are character-driven, and it's all about how people respond in these extreme situations. We used to see those kinds of themes in another genre which used to be incredibly popular, which was Westerns. That's what Westerns are about. A lawless, chaotic world in which normal, good people have to survive in a world that quite often they don't have the protection of the police to save them. They have to figure out what are they going to do? How are they going to survive when these systems of society are not around? That's what Westerns are about. That's what post-apocalyptic movies are about. It doesn't matter whether it was a nuclear bomb or whatever. None of that matters. Now, that said, people who I respect the opinion of, they wanted some sort of explanation. They wanted some exposition at the beginning of this film. And they actually suggested I do some voiceover narration, which I tried and I didn't like it.
They don't advertise for killers in a newspaper. That was my profession. Ex-cop. Ex-Blade Runner. Ex-killer.
So in the end, I wrote this new opening scene. And the purpose of the scene is to give some explanation of the world we find ourselves in without feeling a need to explain everything. But then at least we have some context. We have some idea that there's some problems in the world. And we've seen the two main characters, the man and his daughter. And then when we see that same man later rummaging through people's houses, fighting a guy and killing a guy, we have some context for what's happening. And, you know, certainly having some context of who a character is going to make a difference in whether or not you're somewhat interested in what they're actually doing. But this opening scene is meant to give some idea of where we find ourselves. There's also a whole lot of things in this opening scene which are intended to tell people what this movie is about. Not just the story, but the style. What is it going to be like? Some of this I might have been a little more subtle than I should be, and some people may not notice some of these things. But this introductory music, which is reminiscent of the late 60s, 70s, and that's meant to create a tone. Just like when Quentin Tarantino opens his movies with this 70s movie introduction. It's meant to create a tone. Okay, then we have some long, slow nature shots. And this is supposed to remind you of spaghetti westerns and Sergio Leone. And then we see our two main characters. Again, a long nature shot at a distance, like spaghetti westerns, specifically Sergio Leone, who also happened to be very inspired by Akira Kurosawa, who also liked long, wide shots where we see the actors interacting with each other. And then also in the scene we have this music.
Killing?
Listen to me.
Which again is meant to be reminiscent of a spaghetti western. So if you haven't figured it out by now, the point is, I love spaghetti westerns, specifically Sergio Leone. I love Akira Kurosawa and his samurai movies. All of his movies are great, but I really love his samurai movies. As you're watching this opening sequence, I want you to know, yes, you're watching a post-apocalyptic movie, but you're watching a post-apocalyptic movie that is intended to be reminiscent of a spaghetti western, which means it's low budget. It might have some flaws, but who cares? It's also going to have some style, at least I'm intending it for it to have some style and some flair. It also means it's going to be character-driven. It's going to be slow in some parts because it's focused on developing character and developing atmosphere. If I were making a horror movie, this one would be more like the original Halloween rather than the brand new Halloween. Yes, there will be some action. Some people are going to get killed, but this is not The Walking Dead. What I'm doing in this scene is establishing the most important relationship in the film, which is between the father and his daughter, and that to me is interesting. So I'm setting expectations that this is what the movie is going to be about. So if you're interested in seeing a character-driven movie, with a father and his daughter in a post-apocalyptic world, that's what I'm promising you here. This is going to be more like the original Mad Max than the most recent Mad Max. I love the most recent Mad Max, but I don't have the budget to make that. That's why we're trying on purpose to make it like one of these old, low-budget 70s movies. It's not just that I love those kind of movies, it's also playing into the resources that I have. Now I want to point out right here at the end of the scene, the shadow of this eagle that flies over us, obviously not on purpose, that's not CGI, that really happened, and it was so cool. I actually had to adjust the way I edited the scene so that I got that part into the movie. Now, one more thing, spoiler alert, the other thing I was doing in the opening sequence of this movie is I want it to be somewhat mysterious whether this man is a good guy and this other character we see, when we first see him, he calls himself the sheriff, whether he is a good guy. Now the man, he's stealing stuff, he's killing people who we don't know why. And then when he comes across this woman in trouble, you know, he's looking at her, but is he going to do anything? The sheriff actually comes and saves her. Okay, who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? That's done on purpose. And I want you, especially with the sheriff, to think that he could be a good guy all the way up until really the very end of the movie. So especially at the beginning of the movie, I want to present him as if he is the good guy, and he might even be the hero of the movie. That may not necessarily get anybody's attention, but that's another thing I'm doing here in the opening sequence, which I just wanted to mention. So in the end, I do think the opening sequence does, in a lot of ways, signal to the intended audience of this movie what kind of movie this is going to be. Now, a lot of those things are subtle and meant to be at a subconscious level, but I certainly am trying to get that across to the intended audience. You know, I will say, to me, the sad thing is a lot of people today, they may start watching a movie and they think, I don't like this, and then they go, therefore it's bad. No, it just means it's not for you. And that's fine. No movie is going to be liked by everybody, and even the best movie, some people are going to start watching it and think, I don't like it, this is boring, it doesn't get my attention. Okay, fine. That's perfectly fine. I'm not offended in any way that not everybody's going to like this movie. Now, that being said, did I do a good job of getting people's attention? Does this opening sequence go a little bit too slow? Is it a little bit much to ask people to even wait 5, 6, 7, like I said, 10 minutes before something really to happen? Maybe. Artistically, I'm happy with the opening sequence. That doesn't mean I think it's perfect. I'm happy. I accomplished a lot of things that I intended to accomplish. But maybe I should have done something a little more exciting in the first minute or two, and then I could have led into that scene between the man and his daughter. And perhaps I should have done something a little more obvious to show that this was a post-apocalyptic movie right from the start. Now, I do have an outline for the sequel of this movie, which would feature Larkin, and she's the woman who did the mounted archery later in the movie. I do have an outline for that would start out with a great piece of action, which would be, you know, her on horseback, you know, fighting a group of people. If I was going to make a sequel, that's what the sequel would start out with. Her on horseback, doing her thing, like we started the trailer. So if anybody wants to fund that movie, get in touch with me. All right, that's it for this video. Like, subscribe, and more videos about making low-budget movies, micro-budget movies, and commentary about Once Upon a Time in the Apocalypse to come. Thanks.